just go through the preliminaries. And for those who just came in, thank you very much. Welcome from Plant-Based Pittsburgh. Just a request that while the presentation is going on, that if you could put it on mute, and any questions, just type in the chat room. Oh, my name is Sally Lipsky. And at the end, there will be time for question and answers. We'll try to get to all your questions. And anything that you, at the end, that you want to unmute yourself and talk directly to Dr. Brandy, fine. And it will be up on our YouTube. We are recording, so it will be, you can re-look at it over and over. So on that note, let me just start a real quick introduction. I am so thrilled to have Dr. Dominic Brandy here today. This doctor is a wealth of knowledge. So it is very exciting that he gets to share that knowledge with all of you. So without any further ado, Dr. Brandy, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Dominic Brandy. Those of you that are from Pittsburgh probably are familiar with me. I've had a cosmetic surgery, med spa, and anti-aging practice for about 40 years in Pittsburgh. You've probably seen some of our TV commercials. And we were recently ranked #9 med spa in the country by Allergan, the company that makes Botox. So we were really super excited about that. Thing you probably don't know about me is that 2.5 years ago, I got diagnosed what is called an incurable blood cancer called multiple myeloma. And it's kind of a leukemia of the plasma cells. And my story really started in around September of 2017, which was 2 months before I actually got diagnosed with myeloma. And my wife and I were on a cruise. It was a 2-week cruise. And I've read well over 300 books on health and nutrition in my career. And when I go on vacation, I always read at least one health and nutrition book. So I went on my Kindle and this book popped up, not advancing. So I don't know what's going on here. Just 1 second.
There we go.
Okay. Okay, sorry about that. So this book popped up called How Not to Die by Michael Greger. And I would recommend everyone to read this book. This is just one amazing book. In the back, there are 132 pages of references, scientific references. And that's what really, attracted me to this book. And what the science was showing over and over again was that groups of people and cultures that eat more plant-based have a much lower incidence of cancer, heart attacks, strokes, diabetes, hypertension, really all-cause mortality. So on this cruise with all the meat and desserts and eggs, I decided I was going to eat whole food plant-based, and I've been doing it ever since. So I got home the last week of September, and I was doing a liposuction, and I remembered that, I had a little pain, a little snap, a pop in my right collarbone, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe it was tendonitis from doing all these liposuctions over the years. But in October, the pain just was getting, worse and worse. And my wife and I went on a short vacation in Portland, Oregon, the last week of October. And I remembered on that vacation was actually keeping me up at night. And I told my wife, and I remember it very vividly, I said, Trina, I think I have bone cancer. And she said, oh, you're crazy. You're the healthiest person I know. So I kind of said, okay, well, took that as a reassurance, went home. And in October, you know, the pain, you know, was getting worse. And then the first 2 weeks of November, it was even getting, you know, further worse. And then on November 12th, my wife and I were watching television, and I accidentally knocked a container of water off the coffee table, and I lunged for it, and my collarbone just cracked right in half. So I went to, this isn't advancing again. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what's going on here. So just 1 second. I'm sorry about this. I'm just not getting advancement of the slides. Okay, I'm just going to go. So this is what my collarbone looked like. You can see it was totally displaced. It hurt like hell. And I got an MRI, and I had a 3-centimeter tumor there. And then they did all kind of studies, and they found that I have what's called an IgA myeloma. For those of you that aren't familiar with myeloma, there's IgA, you know, IgG, and IgM. And when I went on the internet, I was reading that IgA had a 2-year survival rate, and IgG was like about an 8, and IgM was about a 15. So IgA was definitely the most aggressive. And because of that, my oncologist wanted to put me on a triple regimen of 2 oral medications and then chemo, where I would have to go in twice a week into the hospital for shots. Well, that chemo drug, the more I was reading about it, 60% of people actually would get a pretty severe peripheral neuropathy. And because I'm a surgeon, you know, I was concerned, you know, like, would I lose hand coordination, whatever. So I told my oncologist that I wasn't doing it. And he was, to put it mildly, he was extremely upset. He said, there's no way you're going to get into a complete remission on these 2 oral medications. But remember, I had already been eating a whole food plant-based diet for 2 months. And I was 100% sure that was going to help me in my battle against this cancer. So I went ahead with the 2 oral medications. Every month, my numbers just kept getting better and better. I would actually post them on my Facebook. People were amazed. And then at 6 months, I got into a complete remission. And my oncologist was floored. He just never thought that ever was going to happen just on these 2 drugs. Since then, which was about 2 years ago, my concentrations have gradually declined. I started at 25 milligrams. Now I'm down to 10. And actually in November, he's going to do a bone marrow, and he actually thinks I don't even have any disease going on. So if I don't, he's going to take me off all medications in around Christmas time. So keep my fingers crossed and hoping that that happens. So when I first got diagnosed, I went on a mission. I was determined to find every herb, every food, every activity that I could do to beat this thing. I was on PubMed, which is the National Library of Sciences, looking at every scientific article, you know, that I could find. In the process, I heard about the chairwoman of the Pittsburgh Myeloma Support Group, Yvonne Yaksik. Heard she was like a 12-year survivor. So I invited her to lunch. I wanted to pick her brain. And it's not going again, Sri. I don't know what... Yeah, I don't know what's going on. So anyway,
just do that.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Oh, this isn't working. So
No, it's not working. It's not working.
Okay, I'm good. So anyway, when I met Yvonne, we went out to lunch, and I told you I had about a 3-hour conversation with her. And I was just trying to find every single thing that she did to be able to survive 12 years. And in the process, you know, I was telling her about how I was eating this whole food plant-based diet and how my numbers were getting better and all the supplements I was taking. So she asked me, hey, would you speak at the myeloma support group in November? So I didn't have any lecture together. I threw, you know, 100 slides together, and I gave a lecture. It was actually exactly 1 year from the date that I broke my collarbone, and it was extremely well accepted. I think it was giving people a feeling of empowerment over the, you know, just the pills and the potions and the infusions, the radiation. So because I had such a positive response, I decided that I was going to have a meeting at the Pittsburgh Plasma Hotel. So I booked a room. Michelle Wright, who's done many interviews with me over the years about cosmetic surgery, did an interview with me. And we ended up getting 125 people coming up. We were expecting 80, and they just kept coming and coming. And it was an amazing event. So I gave this talk. Afterward, I actually got a standing ovation, which I've never had a standing ovation for anything in my life. And I don't know why I did, because I don't think the lecture was that great. They were either feeling sorry for me, or I was giving them, there were a lot of cancer patients in there. I was giving them a feeling of empowerment that they could actually do something beyond all the pills and the infusions. So after that, I started a website. It's called Natural Insights into Cancer. I also have an Instagram site. It's called Cancer Veggie Doc. And then we would have meetings every month at our skin center in Wexford. And we would get anywhere from 50 to 100 people that would show up. But in the process, people kept asking me, you know, are you ever going to write a book? You know, you need to write a book. And I had written a book about 20 years ago. It took me 2 years. And just the idea of doing that just blew my mind. I said, there's no way I can go through that again. But I decided on Memorial Day that I was going to start writing an hour every morning and doing some research in between. And I wanted to be done by Labor Day. So I wrote this book. It's 370 pages. It has over 500 scientific references. It's called Beat Back Cancer Naturally. You can get it on Amazon. I have a paperback, hardback. It's in Kindle, also in audio form. You can also get it on my website. It's called Natural Insights into Cancer. And I'll talk about this a little bit, at the very end of the lecture. So we're going to talk about phytochemicals and where do you find them on nutritional labels? Well, you don't find them on nutritional labels. Typically on nutritional labels, all you find are, vitamins, minerals, the fat content, carbohydrate, fiber, just kind of your basics. But the phytochemicals are really the workhorses against disease. There are over 25,000 of them in plant foods. I've read some studies where they feel there's over 100,000. And when scientists start investigating what they do consistently, they have very powerful antioxidant activity, anti-tumor activity, and anti-inflammatory activity. When you look at fruits and vegetables, when you see all the colors, the reds, the purples, the greens, the yellows, those colors come from the phytochemicals that are in the plants. And that's why you hear people talk about, eating the rainbow, eating as many different variety of foods as you can, because, they're encouraging you to get as many different, phytochemicals as possible. Just kind of looking at one group of phytochemicals, I think probably many of you have heard of the word polyphenols. Polyphenols are high in green tea. They're high in, olive oil, grapes. But if you look in the first row there at the very bottom, it says curcumin. That's in turmeric. I think everybody's heard of that. That's a polyphenol. If you look at isoflavones in the middle row, they're in soy products. In the last row at the very top, if you look at resveratrol, I think many of you have heard of that. That's a very common polyphenol, in grapes. But just to kind of show you, this is just one small group of tens of thousands of phytochemicals. So these things are just, present and massively in plant foods. So as I said, there are over 25,000. Some scientists think there's over 100,000 phytochemicals in plants. But when we start investigating, researching them, consistently, they have very powerful antioxidant activity, anti-tumor activity, anti-inflammatory activity. And the thing that I'm really interested in is their ability to influence our genes, and that's called epigenetics. If you look at the next slide here, look at curcumin. It's like the fifth word down. That's the most prominent phytochemical in turmeric. I want you to follow that on the right, and if you see P53, that is a tumor suppressor gene. That's one of your main ones. It's also called a proto-oncogene. So the green means that curcumin makes the P53 gene act better. So it makes it suppress tumors better. If you look up at the top at BRCA1, BRCA2, BRCA genes are what Angelina Jolie made kind of famous. It's a DNA repair gene and a tumor suppressor gene in the breast tissue. It actually helps prevent breast cancer. So you can see curcumin makes the BRCA gene actually work better. Now, if you look on the left, all the way down at the bottom, if you see P53, remember we saw it on the right, it's a tumor suppressor gene. When it gets mutated, it actually becomes an activated oncogene. So it actually makes cancer more aggressive. So it does the exact opposite. But if you look at curcumin, you can see that it actually inhibits the mutated P53 gene from aggressively promoting cancer cell division. So it's really interesting how these different phytochemicals, you can see proanthocyanidins, you probably heard of those in cranberries, DHA in fish, for example, EG, CG in green tea. So all these really have a major influence on the way that our genes are expressed. So right now I'm going to talk about antioxidation. And oxidation is the way that we age, the way everything ages. If you look at this, penny, over time, it kind of turns a dark color just because it oxidized. Your car rust from oxidation. And we actually oxidize. I mean, that's how we age. And if you look on the left here where the mitochondria are, just through energy production in the mitochondria, which are the little organelles in each one of our cells, there are trillions and trillions of free radicals that are spewed off in the process of energy production. If you look on the right, these are all different types of free radicals that are spewed off. They are molecules with an unpaired electron. And if you remember from chemistry class, electrons do not like to be unpaired. They like to be paired. So what these molecules do is they seek out another electron. In the process, they damage tissues, cellular membranes. And the thing we worry about the most is damaging our DNA. Every expert in the field of cancer will tell you that DNA mutation really is at the root of every single cancer. You really have to have DNA mutations, for the cancer actually to start and then proliferate. Thankfully, we have 3 innate antioxidants in our bodies, catalase, superoxide dismutase, and glutathione peroxidase. And then we have the antioxidants in our food. So if we're eating a lot of plant foods, we're getting a lot of antioxidants from the foods we're eating. So those antioxidants actually contribute an electron to the free radical, and it stops it from doing, its deadly activity. You can overload the system, however, with free radicals. With a bad diet, it's probably the best way to do it. The standard American diet is 50% processed foods, 40% meat and dairy, and only 10% refined plant foods. So the American diet is extremely inflammatory. And when you have a lot of chronic inflammation in your body, I mean, you are just getting excessive production of free radicals really on a continual basis. An average American gets about 800 plus hits to their DNA every single hour. Times that by 24, you're looking at 19,200 hits to your DNA. So your DNA is getting bombarded continuously. This was, so what we basically have here, if you look at the top, those cancer-causing agents, create free radicals, and they damage the proto-oncogene. So that would be that P53 we were looking at before, that tumor suppressor gene. So if you get enough mutations to that proto-oncogene, it actually becomes that mutated P53 that we saw in a previous slide. So that's an activated oncogene. So that activated oncogene actually, instead of suppressing tumors, it actually activates cancer cell division and allows that cancer to metastasize, grow, and kill us, essentially. This was an interview that I read when I first got diagnosed with myeloma. And I'll be honest with you, it depressed the hell out of me when I read it. And this is by Dr. Nick Munch. He's a very famous genomic myeloma researcher. He's an MD. And in this interview, he said, when you get diagnosed with cancer, you have about 5,000 mutations in that cancer cell. And when you relapse, you have about 12,000. And, one of the reasons, a lot of cancer patients get excessive mutations, the drugs actually cause a lot of mutations. So I tell all cancer patients that are in remission, I say, you got to really jack up your antioxidant levels, as high as you possibly can. Just to kind of give you the difference between, plant foods and animal foods. If you look at this sweet potato on the left, the way that we measure the ability of foods to actually neutralize free radicals is with a unit called the ORAC unit. So this sweet potato with a teaspoon of cinnamon and a pinch of clove gives you 246 ORAC units. On the right, we have somebody eating standard American diet. They wake up in the morning, they have an Egg McMuffin, for lunch, Big Mac, and for dinner, they have a steak, and then we give them a little parsley for some extra, antioxidants. So the whole day, they're only getting 44 ORAC units. And that diet that you see there, that is creating so many free radicals. I mean, this individual's getting free radical overload, and they hardly have any antioxidants to neutralize that. So this kind of individual is going to get an excess of DNA mutations as they age. On the left here, these are 5, typical American breakfasts, anywhere from 8 up to 25 ORAC units for the whole meal. I do a smoothie every morning. If you look at that Amla up at the top, Amla is Indian gooseberry. That's actually the most powerful antioxidant food on the face of the earth. If you just put a teaspoon in there, I mean, that's about 782 ORAC units. So my smoothie in the morning, I get about 1,500 ORAC units just right at the beginning of the day. I mean, it's unbelievable what a smoothie can provide you first thing in the morning. What's interesting about phytochemicals to me, it's really a topic of this discussion, is that phytochemicals act synergistically. And what that means is that 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4, 2 plus 2 equals 7. So there's a synergy with these different phytochemicals. I'm going to go through some different studies that are really, really interesting. This is from the Journal of Medicinal Food. And what they did is they put different food extracts on growing MC47 breast cancer cells growing in a petri dish. So what they found in this study was they took grape extract, and the grape extract killed about 30% of the cancer cells. Then they took an onion extract that killed about 50% of the cancer cells. Then they did a half and half concentrated extract. And they figured, if one kills 30, one kills 50, it's probably going to end up killing 40% of the cancer cells. No, it ended up killing 80% of the cancer cells. So this is a great example of the synergy of these different foods. In that same article, they looked at 4 different fruits. They looked at blueberries, grapes, apples, and oranges. They did the same thing. They wanted to see what's the cytotoxic activity, of these different fruits against cancer. And so what they did is they did a 25%, 25%, 25%, 25% mixture, and they figured, it would be somewhere in the middle. No, if you look at the upper line there, the cytotoxic effect was dramatically increased synergistically when you combine them. Just amazing what happens when you combine these foods. This is another interesting article that was in the Journal of Agricultural and Food Chemistry. And in this article, they measured the antioxidant activity of various foods. This was one interesting, one that they looked at. It was azuki beans and raspberries. So if you added their antioxidant power together, it was 6. You would think, but really it ended up being 8. So there was a synergy when you added these 2 foods together. The antioxidant power was, exaggerated. This is another one that looked at synergy, and they looked at carotenoids and other phytonutrients and their ability to fight prostate cancer. This is really interesting. I mean, they took curcumin, tomato extract, and vitamin E, and you can see that their cancer fighting activity was minimal. Vitamin E was actually negative. But when they combined the three, I mean, look how dramatically improved the cancer fighting activity was. It's just really mind blowing how that happens. These are 3 different phytochemicals in tomatoes. I think many of you have heard of lycopene. That's what kind of gives the red color to tomatoes. There's also 2 other ones, phytoene and phytofluene. So if you look at the top, that orange one, that was a combination of phytoene and phytofluene, and then the red is lycopene, and you can see that, you know, they killed the prostate cancer cells, but not dramatically. But when you combine them, look how much dramatically improved the cancer killing, you know, activity was. This is one of my favorite studies, and what they did is they took the 10 most common fruits, and they put extracts on liver cancer cells. And what they found was that cranberries on the left were by far the most powerful. And then lemons were second. And one thing I do recommend for cancer patients, but really anybody in your drinking water, I think it's a good idea to always put, you know, a wedge of lemon. I also put lime. Lime is one of the most alkaline fruits on the face of the earth. And in my book, I get into a whole 3 pages about why cancer patients really need to keep their pH leaning more alkaline. You know, cancer cells have a very, very hard time thriving in a more alkaline environment. So when you eat plant foods in general, they tend to be very alkalinizing. You know, meat and dairy products, processed foods tend to be very acidifying. So it's always a good idea to put a little lemon and lime, you know, in your drinking water. So as you go up, you'll see apples, strawberries, grapes, and it kind of goes up. One of the things I do want to point out here is that cranberries, of all of these fruits, have the highest antioxidant concentration. And we're going to be talking about, you know, antioxidant power and anti-cancer power a little bit later, but it's something to really keep in mind. The other thing I want to point out is if you did this same study against a different kind of cancer, so this was done against liver cancer. If you did it against, you know, let's say pancreatic cancer, this diagram might be completely different. You know, like grapefruit might be the most powerful thing against pancreatic cancer. So, and that's why it's important to eat a variety of different fruits and vegetables, because you really don't know, you know, what kind of cancer you might have brewing, what you have a predisposition toward. So you really want to try to eat, you know, as many as you can in a variety of many different types of fruits and vegetables. So in my coffee every morning, I actually put all these freeze-dried powders in there. You can see blueberry, you know, I put cacao, pomegranate, goji berry. We're going to go back here one second. Hold on one sec. So if you look at blueberry down at the bottom, in all of these I have in my book, I have all the science behind why I put them in there. I just don't throw anything in there. Like mangosteen up on the top, I never heard of mangosteen before I started doing all this research. And I do about a tablespoon of cacao. It gives it kind of a hot chocolate taste. I also put a little bit of cinnamon and clove for extra, you know, antioxidant power. Also, I put about 1/8 of a teaspoon of baking soda in my coffee because coffee is acidic. So when you put a little bit of baking powder in there, it does neutralize it. I've actually checked the pH and it actually becomes a little bit alkaline. But I want you to look at the blueberry powder 50 to 1. So what that means is 1 gram of the powder equals 50 grams of blueberries. So I love these freeze-dried powders. I think anybody that has cancer needs to do these. These give you an intense concentration of these phytochemicals. Now look up at the right at strawberry powder. This is a fascinating study. This was a study that was done on individuals that had early esophageal cancer. And for those of you that are not familiar with esophageal cancer, it's the second most deadly cancer next to pancreatic cancer. So when you get a diagnosis of esophageal cancer, I mean, you're pretty much dead. It just really has a horrible prognosis. So what they did in this study, they took patients that had early esophageal cancer and they gave them 1/4 cup of freeze-dried strawberry powder every day for 6 months. And what they found is that 80.6% of these individuals had reversal of their cancer. If you look at these individuals, if you look at the top, that's what a early cancer looks like on endoscopy. You can see below, these are ones that were reversed, but not totally eliminated. You can see it got smaller. 50% of these individuals had complete elimination of the early cancer. And this was just with the freeze-dried powder. These people didn't change their diet or anything. It was just adding a quarter cup of freeze-dried powder every day. So just to kind of show you the power of these freeze-dried powders. And that's why I put them in my smoothie. I put them in my coffee in the morning. In my smoothie, these are all the different fruits I put in. Once again, I want to take advantage of synergism between all these different, fruits. And these are the powders that I put in. You can see Amla's up there in the left-hand corner. If you look on the bottom, the flax seed and chia is something you should always put in your smoothie. I also put hemp seed. And what they give you are the omega-3 essential fatty acids, which most people in the United States are sorely lacking. These are very anti-inflammatory. And I really tell people to try to keep their omega-6 to omega-3 ratio at about 2 to 1. The average American is like 20 to 1. Some people are 40 to 1. I mean, it's just crazy how inflammatory the American diet is. This is another interesting article that is very similar to the fruit one we just did. So in this article, they use liver cancer cells once again, and they put the 10 most common nuts, the extracts on these growing liver cancer cells. And what they found, if you look on the left, is that walnuts were the most potent, pecans were second, peanuts were third, then you have your almonds and then cashews, and then it goes up the line. One of the things that I do want to point out is that when you look at the antioxidant levels of all these different nuts, walnuts and pecans have by far the highest antioxidant activity. If you look up at the top there, 25 walnuts has the vitamin C content of 800 oranges, believe it or not. And what we're finding, I have about 3 pages of this dedicated in my book through what's called molecular probe technology. What they're finding is that when an antioxidant enters a cancer cell, because cancer cells have very high iron and copper levels, in the presence of those high levels, that antioxidant actually becomes a pro-oxidant, it actually becomes a free radical, and that's one of the ways that it actually kills the cancer cell. And you will find, in general, the higher the antioxidant content of a food, the greater its cancer-killing, activity. Now, this is what I do in the morning, and I know you're going to think I'm a fanatic, but before I take my supplements, I actually take 2 walnuts, and these are all organic, 2 almonds, 2 pecans, 2 cashews, 2 pistachios, a Brazil nut, a few organic peanuts, a few organic pumpkin seeds, and then I do 2 hazelnuts and some sunflower seeds. And the reason I just don't grab a bunch of pecans is that I want to take advantage of the synergism that I've been teaching you about. The other reason that I take these nuts before I take my supplements is that you need fat before you take any supplements, or you are not going to absorb your vitamin A, all your fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, K, coenzyme Q10. You're not going to absorb your, fat-soluble carotenoids. Your turmeric is not going to get absorbed. So it's always important to take fat beforehand. I also take an omega-3, supplement beforehand, so that all those fat-soluble, vitamins can get absorbed. The other thing we're finding is that nuts, there was a recent meta-analysis on several studies, and they showed that if you eat about an ounce of nuts per day, you actually have about a 46% reduction in overall mortality. So they are very, health promoting. Now, everything up to this point, we've talked about taking, an extract and putting it on growing cancer cells. Well, in this study, they wanted to say, what happens if you feed someone, for instance, walnuts, and then you take their blood and then you put that on the growing prostate or breast cancer cells. This was a breast cancer culture that they used for this study. But what they found was, they gave one group all these walnuts and they gave the other group nothing. And then they took the blood and they dripped it on these growing breast cancer cells. And what they found was the people that were eating all these walnuts, the blood decimated these cancer cells, and the blood of the people that just, weren't eating the walnuts, the cancer just kept proliferating. So it's interesting, it just shows you that when you are eating a health promoting diet with a lot of these phytochemicals, I mean, you have all these cancer killing phytochemicals really going into every nook and cranny of your body, really, decimating cancer cells wherever they are. This is another great study. And what they did in this study is they looked at 6 different cancers. And they put all these different food extracts on each one of these cancers. And the thing I want you to look at is, first off, on the right, the shorter the bar, the more intense the cytotoxic activity against the cancer cell. Now, consistently, if you look in yellow, they are the allium vegetables. So that would be your onion, garlic, and leeks. I mean, these things, if you want to prevent cancer, or you have cancer, or you're in remission, you need to be eating these every single day. The green are your cruciferous vegetables. That would be your broccoli, cauliflower, your Brussels sprouts, kale, radish. Those consistently are on the right. So you need to be eating cruciferous vegetables every day. Now, if you look all the way to the left, you'll see bok choy way over there. Like if you look at medulloblastoma, it's way off to the left. So when that bar is real high like that, it means it's really not doing a whole lot to the cancer. If you also look at pancreatic cancer for bok choy, and you look at breast cancer for bok choy, really doesn't do anything. The other 3, it's kind of in the middle. The point I want to make, and I was trying to make it with that fruit study, is that you need to eat a variety, because you really don't know, what cancer you may have brewing. And if you do have a cancer and you want to stay in remission, you really don't know what fruit or vegetable is really going to be fighting that cancer the best. So it's good to eat a variety. And that's one of the reasons, I always preach to people, eat the rainbow. We talked about that a little bit earlier. Like, this is a typical salad that I have. I counted how many vegetables I actually put in there. There's 25 vegetables actually in that salad. So instead of, having a bunch of lettuce and then some tomatoes and carrots, you're better off putting, a couple broccoli, a couple cauliflower, a couple radish, like just put a little bit of a lot of different types of vegetables so that you get, that synergistic effect. One thing we find with these phytochemicals, almost every one of them has what they call anti-angiogenic power. Now, angiogenesis is what happens when a cancer starts to grow. So cancer needs a lot of blood supply to grow and to metastasize. Phytochemicals fight that. They're anti-angiogenic, so they prevent the blood supply from developing to the cancer cell. So if you look at these teas here, teas have very potent anti-angiogenic activity. If you look at the dragon pearl jasmine and the sencha, that's their angiogenic activity. If you do a half and half solution, you would think it would be in the middle. No, if you look at the right in blue, it's synergistic. You get this synergism when you do a blend. And because of that, at night, before I take my supplements again, so I do 30 plus supplements in the morning, I do 30 plus before I go to bed, I do this mixture of these 4 different teas. And each one of these I have cataloged in my book, the science behind them. Actually, hibiscus, there's a good article that I referenced that shows that it actually has pretty potent activity against myeloma, the cancer that I have. Green tea on the right is very potent against cancer. There are thousands of articles written on its cancer, anti-cancer activity. And if you look at population studies, populations that drink more green tea have much lower incidence of cancer. One interesting thing about green tea that I recently learned is that, never drink it really hot, because when it's hot, the phytochemicals actually kind of go down to the bottom. When it starts to cool off at about 10 minutes, they kind of disperse, through the solution. So, always give about 10 minutes with these teas before you actually, drink them. This is the last thing I'm going to talk about is turmeric. And I will tell, all of you in the audience, if you're going to take one supplement, it should be turmeric. There have been over 15,000 articles written in the scientific literature on turmeric, and consistently it has very strong anti-inflammatory and anti-cancer, activity. If you look at curcumin, which is the one everybody always talks about when they talk about turmeric, it's kind of the main phytochemical in turmeric. On the left in green and on the right, these are all chemotherapeutic drugs. So curcumin literally acts like all of these chemotherapeutic drugs without any side effects. That's what's beautiful about these phytochemicals. And this is the way, you know, in my book, I have all the different ways that phytochemicals kill cancer, and it's all documented in the scientific literature. It's actually, the more I was researching this, the more my mind was completely blown. You know, so phytochemicals actually cause cancer cell suicide. They fragment cancer DNA. They stop cancer cell division at various stages of the cell cycle. They become cancer-killing pro-oxidants in the presence of cancer's high iron and copper levels. We talked about that a little bit earlier. It significantly reduces inflammation. Cancer cannot grow without inflammation. There have been studies that have looked into this. You need inflammation for cancer to grow. It helps prevent chemotherapy resistance, inhibits cancer proteasomes. So proteasomes basically get rid of contaminated proteins. So it basically inhibits those. So those proteins accumulate and it actually kills the cancer cell. And then we talked about how almost all of them block cancer cell blood vessels. And this is about half of the different ways that these phytochemicals can kill cancer. Now, when you look at turmeric, there's over 300 different phytochemicals in turmeric. So everybody always thinks of curcumin, but you have tumerone, zingerone. I mean, there's all these different phytochemicals in there. And we've been talking about, you know, synergy, how that's important. So what this study did is they looked at 7 different cancers, and they put either just curcumin or the turmeric with all the 300 phytochemicals in it. Then they looked at the cytotoxic activity against each one of these cancers. You can see that the turmeric worked way better in every single cancer compared to just the curcumin. And that kind of goes along with the whole theme of this whole lecture is, you know, the synergy. You need to like have a bunch of different phytochemicals working together synergistically because you get a much more powerful effect. So when I do turmeric, I always look for a supplement that is not 95% standardized for curcumin. I usually try to find one, like this is one I used to take, can't get anymore on Amazon. It's just plain turmeric. I get one from Horbach now on Amazon, but I always look for one that isn't standardized to 95% curcumin. I do 8 grams per day. I do 4 grams in the morning, 4 grams at night. Most of the studies that have shown reversal of even myeloma, like MGUS, there's a couple really good studies that actually show reversal of the numbers. Most of them show you need about 8 grams. And then I do black pepper extract. You can see that on the right. I do 4 of those beforehand. And study after study shows that black pepper significantly increases the bioavailability. It increases the absorption, and it also decreases the ability of the liver to actually metabolize it. So it's more bioavailable. And it really allows the turmeric to work better in your body. So as I said before, at the very bottom, I take nuts and an omega-3 supplement beforehand so that I can absorb it, because you will not absorb turmeric if you're not taking fat. So if you look at just a turmeric supplement, it'll tend to be more orangish. If you look at a turmeric that is standardized to 95% curcumin, it'll have more of a yellow tint. And I actually took this photo at Whole Foods. It was on my Instagram site. By the way, my Instagram is Cancer Veggie Doc. If you'd like to do Instagram, I do 1 or 2 posts every single day. But when I took the photo, it just made me realize that turmeric isn't really yellow. It's really more of an orange color. But when you see yellow, it essentially is 95%, you know, curcumin. So this is basically the whole, you know, theme of my lecture is you need variety in your foods. You know, instead of eating 5 apples, you know, eat an apple, an orange, a banana, grapefruit, you know, like really you got to create variety so that you get, you know, the synergy that we've been talking about during this whole lecture. And I really want to, you know, end with this. You know, we control the ship and the sail, but never the wind or the waves. You know, bad things happen to good people doing everything right. You know, I do all these things. I take the nuts, I do these teas and everything else, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to get a relapse, because it could happen. You know, so there's no guarantees, but bad things happen less often if you're doing all the right things. So do whatever you can. You know, you can't control everything, but control what you can control. My book you can get on Amazon in paperback or softback. You can get on Kindle. You know, it's on audiobook. You can also get it on my website. My website is naturalinsightsintocancer.com. And if you get it on there, I will, if you buy a paperback, I will send you a signed hardback. I'll sign it with a little, saying in there, and I'll give you a free bookmark. So if you're interested, just go to my website. You know, you can order my book in a paperback, and I'll send you a signed hardback. So I just want to thank you for listening today. There's some really amazing, fascinating information about these phytochemicals in the scientific literature, and I really just wanted to share it with you. And I hope you learned something today.
Thank you, Dr. Nick, from all of us. You did not disappoint. As I told the people, you're just a wealth of knowledge. And there's a couple questions on the chat that we'll go over, and then people can post other questions, or if we have time, if you want to unmute. So, the first one was at the beginning of your presentation. What was the name of the cancer drug that?
The one that the oral medications that I take are Revlimid and dexamethasone. So when I started, I was taking 25 milligrams of Revlimid. I was at 40 grams of dexamethasone. Now I'm like at 10 milligrams of Revlimid and 8 milligrams of dexamethasone. And I've held my numbers in complete remission over 2 years. So like I said,
Amazing.
In November, they're going to do a bone marrow because my doctor thinks I don't really have anything going on because all my numbers have been clean for so long. So he said if there's nothing going on, he's going to take me off all the meds. So that's what I'm really hoping for. The medication that I rejected was called Velcade. It's a proteasome inhibitor. So that's the one that gives a lot of people a really bad peripheral neuropathy. And I just did not want to go there. So I was able to avoid that and still get into a complete remission.
Nate asked the question, you mentioned that limes are one of the most alkaline-rich fruits.
Yes.
How can that be, given that limes are a citric fruit, which folks often associate with acidity?
Yeah, it's interesting. When you eat, like for instance, lemons and limes, you would think they're very acidic, but when your body metabolizes those, it actually creates an alkaline effect. Years ago, I went to a anti-aging meeting, and there was a PhD there that actually dedicated his whole life to this whole topic, like what foods actually do to your pH. And in the back of my book, I actually have an alkaline base chart from his work. It's very meticulous work that he did. But lime is in the most alkaline category. Other fruits in there, like, watermelons are in the most alkaline. So that's, if you're ever leaning a little bit acidic, if you eat a bunch of watermelon before you go to bed, you'll wake up in the morning and your urine pH will be very, very alkaline. But if you just kind of look at the chart, raspberries are the most alkaline in the most alkaline chart. You can kind of look at it. It basically has most alkaline and the least alkaline, and then the most acidic, least acidic, and then kind of in the middle, acidic and alkaline. And of the fruits and vegetables, the only ones that are leaning acidic are corn, carrots, beans. They're the main ones that are a little bit on the acidic side. So, but all the other ones are very, alkalinizing.
One question from Leslie. What do you eat for protein?
Well, every time I've checked my protein, and for those of you in the audience, the way to figure out the government recommendation for protein is you take your weight in pounds times 4, and then you divide that by 10. So my protein requirement, I weigh about 155 pounds. So my protein requirement's about 62 grams per day. I've checked my protein level on consistent days. I'm always over 100, and I don't even want to be that high. I mean, one thing that we're finding is that when your protein is high, especially animal protein, it actually stimulates your liver to produce IGF-1, which is a growth hormone, which has been directly correlated to cancer growth. So I get more protein than I want. That coffee drink, just to kind of give you an idea, when I just do that one coffee, I am already, just if you look at cacao powder, how much protein is actually even in that, and then I add soy milk to it. I mean, I'm up about 10 grams of protein just with my coffee, and I haven't even eaten anything. Then I eat all those nuts. I'm up to about 40 already. You know, I haven't even started my day. So, you know, I eat a lot of beans. I eat beans every single day. I think, you know, studies show, longevity studies show that cultures that actually have very high bean content have much greater longevity. So beans are, you know, a fantastic source of protein. Tofu, like your soy products, we eat a lot of tofu in our different meals and so forth. But you would be amazed at how many foods that you would never think have a lot of protein do. Like 1 ear of corn has 5 grams of protein. Would you ever think that? A cup of blackberries has 2 grams of protein. Would you ever think that? Most people would never even think that. So if you really look at even like fruits and vegetables and you look at their protein content, you would be fascinated how much protein there actually is in, especially vegetables. And remember, all protein comes from plants. You know, when a gorilla, you know, that just eats plants, you know, where do they get their protein? They're getting it from the plants. You know, a lot of your largest, you know, animals are, you know, elephants are vegetarians. Look how big they are. So, you know, you don't need excessive amounts of protein. In fact, most Americans are way protein overloaded. And that's why we have so much chronic kidney disease in the United States.
Okay, I think we have one more question. Was it Yvonne that raised your hand? No. Okay, so here's our other question, one more question.
Okay.
From Nate again. What about someone who is anemic and needs lots of iron? Which fruits and vegetables are iron rich to offset an iron deficiency?
Well, I would say beans are one of your highest, you know, iron foods. Your green leafy vegetables have a lot of iron. I always tell people just kind of go on the internet and just type in, you know, like foods that have the highest iron. But I personally try to keep my iron levels low, because remember when I talked about how cancer really needs a lot of iron? You know, one of the ways you can starve cancer is by actually, you know, creating iron deficiency. I'm not iron deficient, but I keep my ferritin levels at low normal, and I get it checked about every 3 months to keep it at low normal, because I really do not want it high. Those that eat heme iron, and heme iron is a different kind of iron. It's in meats. What they find is that heme iron is actually a reagent for what's called the Fenton reaction, and it creates tons of what are called lipid peroxides. These are free radicals, or very potent free radicals that, as we've discussed, cause a lot of DNA mutations. So, you know, if you go through the scientific literature, you will find that, you know, groups of people that eat high meat content, you know, have much higher incidence of various types of cancers. And dairy is one that actually is very much correlated with prostate cancer. So, you know, what I recommend people to do is really, you know, do a lot of reading. If you read my book, I have 500 scientific references in the back. Dr. Greger, he has 132 pages in the back. I mean, it's mind-blowing, the science in his book. The other thing I would recommend to your viewers, I strongly recommend that you go on Dr. Greger's website. It's called nutritionfacts.org, and he has over 4,000 5-minute videos. And when you subscribe, you actually get a video every day. I mean, this guy's like the most prolific man I've ever seen in my life. He's got a group of about 20 scientists, and they review every single article in the clinical nutritional literature. Last year, they reviewed 190,000 articles. And then what they do is they take all this science, and then they put these videos together. So I really strongly recommend people, you know, kind of watch one video a day, just to kind of keep you in the right track. Because the science is extraordinary. I mean, what these people do, it saves me a ton of time. So, a lot of the, science that I get is actually from a lot of the videos that I watch. Every day I watch 1 or 2 videos. Like this morning, I watched 3 of them, like while I was getting ready, for work in the morning, I just kind of set it on my shelf and I listen to these things, as I'm getting ready in the morning. So always trying to get information in that brain. So.
Two more questions.
Okay.
We have one. Sorry, Ava, I skipped it. It says I have SMM1 am. Golly, I don't know what Ava means. Maybe Ava, if you want to unmute yourself and ask him.
Sure. Hi, Dr. Brandy.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great.
I found your book from Smart Patient.
Oh, okay, great. I
bought it.
Are you on the myeloma group?
Yes.
Okay, awesome.
I bought your book as soon as it came out. It was wonderful. It was like she said, it's a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you.
I am smoldering. I have the IgG kappa.
Okay.
I've been following a lot of what you said. I've been on a plant-based site now. I guess it's been about a year.
Okay.
Now the powders that you take, how much do you take each morning?
Well, what I do, those ones that I showed you, I put a teaspoon in my cup. So, and then I do about a tablespoon of the cacao because first off, cacao has tons of polyphenols. It really does have a lot of potent anti-cancer activity, but I want to give it kind of a hot chocolate, kind of a taste. And then I put like 20 shakes of cinnamon, and then I do 10 shakes of clove because both of those give it flavoring, but also they are like potent, antioxidant concentrations in both of those. So I add those, and then I do the baking. I always do a little bit of baking soda in there just to neutralize the acidity. But I know that sounds like, geez, when you put that in there, what does it end up like? I use a Keurig, which really helps. So I put all those powders in there, I kind of mix them, and then I run the Keurig. And as the Keurig's going, I kind of stir, and they just kind of, go into solution. It's kind of crazy, how it happens. Then I always add soy milk. Okay. Because soy milk's kind of creamy and it really gives it a nice taste. And I do a packet of stevia too, for sweetening. But I look forward to that every morning. So as soon as I wake up in the morning, I get my this coffee drink that I do, and then I get on my computer and I start working. And then, I'm working for like 2 or 3 hours. Then I do my nuts. I make my smoothie, and then I take my supplements. So that's basically, I do intermittent fasting. I basically eat in 8 hours. So I really don't do those supplements until about 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock noon. And my last, eating at night is about 8 o'clock. So I basically don't eat from, 8 p.m. all the way to noon the next day. And a lot of the studies right now are showing that when you do that, there was one good study I have in my book on breast cancer. They found that in that study, 13 hours was the kind of the cutoff. When people fasted longer, 13 hours or longer, they actually had less breast cancer relapse. When it was 13 hours or less, they had a higher incidence of breast cancer relapse. So in that one study, 13 hours seemed to be the magic number, but, I basically do 15 to 16 hours, every day. So, and it gives your body a chance to, repair the DNA. There's something called autophagy where the body is actually, repairing or getting rid of a lot of these contaminated proteins. We talked about those proteasomes, how they, basically get rid of protein that's been, contaminated or, kind of mutated. So there's a lot that goes on when you're not eating all the time. So the energy is being, directed toward healing rather than digestion. So I do that every day also.
Great. Okay, thank you. I learned something today where you said you took your nuts and stuff first. I would always do the drink first and later in the day I do my nuts, but now I'm going to do that first.
Yeah, one thing about nuts though, I did a post on Instagram probably about 3 weeks ago, and it was something I didn't even really know before I I did some research on this, but it takes about 2 to 3 hours to digest nuts. So, since I'm doing that first thing in the morning, what I started to do, I take 2 digestive enzymes with it first thing in the morning, with the nuts, and it really helped a lot. Because I found that I was just kind of like burping a little bit like in the morning, and I know it was from the nuts. So when I started doing those 2 digestive enzymes with the nuts, that went away. So like that solved the problem. So that's the only problem with doing nuts first thing in the morning. But you don't really have to do those. If you want to just do like an omega-3, like I do Omax 3, I do 3 in the morning and 3 at night.
Do that too. Okay.
If you just do that, before you take your supplements, that's just as good. The other things that I take that are fat, I do black seed oil, which I have, there's a lot of documented science on that. It's called thymoquinone. It's the main phytochemical that fights cancer in black seed extract, black seed oil. And I also do DHA. If you remember that first slide that I showed you on all the phytochemicals and the way they influence genes, DHA was one of the ones that was in there. So, that's one of your essential, fatty acids. So I do a DHA, an Omax, which has EPA and DHA, and then I do the black seed oil, and then I, you could just do that and take your supplements and you'd be fine. Yeah. So you don't have to do all the nuts like
thank you.
I mean, you got to be nuts to do all the nuts that I do. So.
Okay, we just want to make sure we get Yvonne's question in. She wants to know, do you recommend raw veggies over cooked veggies?
You know what? I think you should do both. Like if you're doing broccoli's better if you do it raw. But some vegetables, for instance, like tomatoes, I mean, they've found that when you cook tomatoes, the lycopene in there, we talked about that in one of those studies, one of the phytochemicals in tomatoes, it actually becomes much more potent when you cook it. So, and one of the other things that I always tell people, not get like too, focused on that, because what happens is when you cook vegetables, you break down the cellular wall a little bit. And I personally think when you cook them, sometimes you get more of the nutrients actually absorbed, because when you eat them raw, your body's got to break down that cellulose that is surrounding all of those raw vegetables. So I think it's good to do a combination. Like every day I eat a big salad. Like I had that for dinner tonight with as many different vegetables as I can. We had, my wife made potato pancakes, they were amazing. We had corn on the cob, that was cooked. So I think it's good to do kind of a combination of both. Like I don't think it's, I don't really think you need to focus on that, but there are certain, vegetables that are better to eat raw, and there are ones that are better to eat, cooked. And, tomatoes are one that basically has more, phytochemical punch when you cook it than when it's raw. So I think it's good to do a combination of both.
Yes. And again, if you want, Dr. Greger on his nutritionfacts.org has a series on which vegetables, raw versus cooked, which ones.
Yeah, he does have a really good video on that. You probably should watch that. That website is amazing.
Incredible.
Like if you ever are not sure of something, like one time my wife and I got a discussion about gluten-free, because everybody's on this gluten-free kick. And I said, well, let's see what Dr. Greger. So I go on his website, and then you type in, search topics, and I write in gluten, and then all these videos pop up. And he's got videos on every topic. And, kind of when I went in there, I kind of learned that, like there's a lot of people that think they're, gluten sensitive. They really aren't, it's really not as prevalent as what people think. But, it kind of like cleared up the discussion, because I know that his group is going through all the scientific literature. So, like, for instance, a lot of people were asking me about CBD oil, and marijuana in relationship to cancer. So I went on nutritionfacts.org, I typed it, and then like Dr. Greger went through all the science. Apparently there were 13 articles that, studies that have actually been done on marijuana against cancer. And a third of them showed it killed the cancer. A third of them showed that it made it worse. And then a third of them showed that it didn't do anything. So it was like, okay, I'm not doing that, so, but it's his website is absolutely amazing. And he's really one of the most prolific people I have ever seen in my life. I mean, his group is just unbelievably amazing.
So, yes. Well, you're amazing also. I really have to close
Well, I
this
try.
by
I try.
thanking you.
So,
Yeah, your
I appreciate it.
generosity with sharing and with so many people that you've done in the last couple of years. It's
I
wonderful.
appreciate that. And I thank you for writing the foreword to my book. You know, you did an amazing job. Appreciate that.
Yes, heartfelt.
Yeah.
So just a reminder, this will be on our YouTube. I'll be posting it. I'll send everybody here who's on, I'll send all of you the link. How's that? When Brittany stops the recording. And we look forward to what next future presentation, Dr. Brandy.
Well, I have a bunch of them that I finally
Okay.
learned how to do PowerPoint. I
There
always
you
gave it
go.
to my secretary. And during COVID, I said, you know what, I'm going to start doing this myself. So I started doing, I enjoy like all the transitions and animations and all that. I'm getting better at it. So I really enjoy doing that. So,
Yes.
but I got a bunch of them, you know, that I can do for you. So.
Okay. Well,
All right.
we'll take it. Okay.
Okay.
Good
Well,
night,
thanks
everybody.
for inviting me. It was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.